I'm about to do a video on a warning that Jamie Dimon just gave. Most people wouldn't think it's a warning, but as I was setting up for this video, I came to sit down next to this lake. I passed by some nice ladies, some Jehovah's Witnesses out with their books and their stand, wanting to talk to people. And as I'm about to do this video live about a warning, and when you hear this warning, it's gonna be really interesting because this has 100% to do with their reaction. I said, good morning. And they said, so what are you doing? You're going to go get photos of the birds with my, with my camera? I said, no, I'm gonna go warn people about the next economic crash. And they just went, literally rolled their eyes and said, oh, will you go do that? And this warning from Jamie Dimon is 100% factual based off of the conversation I just had with two nice ladies that were that are doing nice things for people, trying to share good news, good information, but human beings don't want to hear bad information. And what's funny, in the Bible, there's a verse that says, my people, God speaking, he says, my people suffer for a lack of knowledge. Or sorry, I have the verse wrong. They perish for a lack of knowledge. And the word perish is interesting. A lot of people would think the word perish has to do with death, but perish to me, and I don't know the actual definition, if anyone wants to pop it up in the screen, that would be great. I'll pin it to the top of the comments. Has to do with not living up to your full standard, like a slow death, slowly dying, right? When you don't know the truth. Well, check out this story out of Market Watch. And we're talking about an economic crash that is absolutely happening in real time. 3 years ago, when I started this channel, I said, I'm going to show you piece by piece, because this is my second economic crash that I went through when I sold my .com stocks before the .com crash, when I sold my houses before the housing crash, seeing all of the signals, reading about the cycles, learning about them, and then the subsequent drop off. And I made out like a bandit. And I wanted this time, because I knew how big it was to take 1 million people with me, show them how to do it, how to take advantage and go crush it. The proof that the economy is crashing is the Fed, that just one instance, one bit of proof is the Fed just dropped interest rates 50 basis points. That's massive. That's alarming to a lot of traders that are intelligent. They're like, oh, wait a minute. Why are you dropping it? It's because the commercial banks are collapsing, right? Commercial lending's crashing. And it's going to filter through the contagion it's causing already. What we saw last year with the banking crash last year, and it was a crash. When the FDIC comes out and says in July, we have no more money, we're insolvent, and to the point where they never had to do this, banks, we need more money, we need to charge you higher insurance rates. And then the banks come back and go, no way, we can't afford it. The Fed goes, don't ask the small and mid-sized banks, they'll collapse. So then you've got the big banks, Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, going before Congress saying, we don't want to pay the extra, because if you force us to pay this extra, we can't compete on the world stage with other banks. That's a banking crash. You've already went through that part of the cycle. You went through the Bear Stearns moment when Bear Stearns closed their doors in 2008. Now we're getting ready for the Lehman Brothers moment. And it all comes down to this election. And not because voting for one side or the other is going to make a difference. It's going down either way. Doug, thank you so much for moderating today. All the moderators here for taking care of comments. Really appreciate it. If anyone can thank the moderators, because we do these things live for your benefit. Because I would be remiss if I hid behind a bunch of fancy editing. Check out this story. Jamie Dimon says that only 5% of everyday Americans probably know about the Fed historic interest rate cut. Now, I've said this before. Jamie Dimon he's one of the smartest guys in the room only because of the amount of data that he has access to. He runs the largest bank in the country, one of the largest on earth. He is the smartest guy in the room because of the data, all right? When he talks about only 5% of people understand the significance of that rate cut, that means that there are only 5% of those people that think or understand that things are bad. And even out of those 5%, probably only 1% of the people that understand how bad it is are actually doing something about that. The other 95% of Americans are just like the two ladies right there that said, oh, you go warn them about an economic crash. I'll bet you if I asked them if either of them lost their home during 2008 or knew somebody in their church, they would tell me yes. Yet nobody wants to be warned ahead of time. Ironically, they're out talking to people and witnessing, which is great. They want to share their faith. But the Bible is full of stories of God giving warnings to people. And then they had a choice, either heed the warning or ignore the warning. And then the third part of that equation is the outcome. Were you blessed or were you destroyed? It's up to you. And Jamie Dimon, running one of the largest banks on earth, is sitting there saying only about 5%, in his opinion, of people understand that the Fed dropping rates 50 basis points instead of 25 is a shot across the bow to the American public that, hey, the jig's up. He says here, the rate cut is a minor kind of thing. There are about 320 million Americans, and if you surveyed them, only 5% would know about it. That's what JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon suggested, that while Wall Street has obsessed over the Federal Reserve's 50 basis point interest rate cut this week, it's not the top of mind for most Americans. The Fed rate cut won't affect the outcome of the U.S. presidential election, Dimon said on Friday at the Atlantic Festival, which is run by the Atlantic Monthly magazine in Washington, D.C. He said that the mortgage rates had already started coming down ahead of the Fed's decision on Wednesday, and he estimated that only about 5% of U.S. residents are even aware of that rate cut. Well, let me ask you this. How many people in your family or your social circles that you've probably been beating your head up against a wall, even I'll bet you asking yourself, why am I even trying? Why am I wasting my breath? Because when you try and show people the truth, and I'll be honest, when I was working at the fire station, I remember telling these guys, I'm like, here you have one of the wealthiest guys you guys know trying to warn you and teach you. And because I was a peer of theirs, right? They were rolling their eyes and stuff. And here I'm exhausting myself, wasting breath, even explaining things to you when they would mock me about the gold or why I was buying up all this real estate way back in the early 2000s, like 2001, right? Then I was selling it and I was a doom and gloomer. None of them wanted to talk to me, as a lot of those guys were having trouble paying their bills, and some were even losing their homes. I remember going, why do I even waste my breath? Well, it's because honestly, I would pray for someone that knew something about my life that was going to affect me, that would take the time to share that with me. And so I continually try and warn people, right? But it's like you're banging your head against the wall. Well, out of all those people that you're warning, right, that you're trying to help, ironically, and I'm sure there's a lot of you that sit there and, like me, go, if I pulled up in a Ferrari, they'd listen to me. But I could have the amount of money in my bank to buy a Ferrari cash, and they'll think I'm the dumbest guy in the world. It's just insane. Americans, human beings, not just Americans, are all based off of appearance. That's why social media has done a ton of damage. And in my opinion, I'm trying to do it to do a lot of good, but only if people look past it. Well, how many of those people that are, you're banging your head trying to warn are actually have any concept of what the interest rates are doing, other than how expensive their car payment is, or their house payment, or they're bitching and moaning over inflation? But they have no concept that the Federal Reserve didn't just lower rates, they threw out a salvo round. That's a salvo. When you just go, we're gonna toss this thing right in the middle and let it blow up and see what happens. I know it sounds crazy to some people. There may be people watching this video for the first time going, who's this dork sitting here with a weird haircut talking about, Jamie Dimon, interest rates, weird people, and salvo rounds. But the fact of the matter is, it's a big deal. And it's exciting. When Bank of America comes out and goes, we think the next rate cut's going to be 75 basis points, that's because things are crashing. The Fed wouldn't just do this unless they had to. See, a political statement's 25 basis points and say everything's looking really good. But when you come out and you hit it with 50 basis point drop and you say, this is not politically driven, this has nothing to do with the election, and everything's great, the economy's really strong, you can take it. Hey, Jerome, I'm sorry, but a lot of us actually are old enough to remember the last 2 rate cut cycles. And we know how big of a deal this is. And I'm hell-bent on getting out there and making sure it gets spread like wildfire. says here, most Americans are aware of the Fed's existence. At least a recent Pew Research Center survey found that 45% have a favorable view, 45% of the U.S. central banking system, while 32% have an unfavorable view. They probably all own silver, and 23% are not sure. Those are probably just the 45% maybe liberals. We have no clue. I mean, anybody that really likes the Federal Reserve banking system, geez, you got to be voting for the left. It says here, regardless of whether most Americans heard, and I only say that because it's true. I mean, honestly, let's just call a spade, all right? Let's call it's called logical thinking. There's a reason why our founding fathers did not want a central bank in play. They wanted real money to be money, gold and silver, because you can't have any inflation attached to it, because there's only so much of it rolling around. Regardless of what most Americans heard in the news about this week's interest rate cut of 50 basis points or not, the Fed's plan to continue cutting rates to tame inflation. Now, man, dude, these reporters are so dumb. I'm going to repeat this one more time. The Fed's plan to continue cutting rates to tame inflation. Like, I'm not even being melodramatic. The only way you tame inflation is by causing debt to become more expensive. How do you do that? Two different ways. You pull debt off, sorry, I didn't even mean to do that. You pull debt off the table, right? You pull debt off the table, so you make it harder to get money. You like increase lending standards, like higher credit scores. I totally did not mean to do that. I'm flipping off my channel. You make it more difficult, right, to get debt. So you pull debt back. The second way you do it is that you cause interest rates to go up. You bring interest rates higher, okay? Either way, it pulls debt off the table. Less people take on loans to go and buy things because it gets more expensive. So this reporter, now think about this. This is a reporter from Market Watch. Market Watch, you should take this reporter and fire him or her, all right? And just, I only say him and her because there's only two different types of human beings. There's a dude and a lady. All right, here we go. The Fed's plan to continue cutting rates to tame inflation will eventually affect their finances by lowering the interest rates on their savings accounts, as well as reducing the borrowing costs for car loans, mortgages, and credit cards. Well, Mr. or Mrs. Reporter, let me give you a shot of reality in the arm. When you lower interest rates, what happens is, sure, your savings account is making less, because if inflation is still running hot, you're continually losing more and more money. I'm sure if those ladies wanted to listen for a second rather than roll their eyes and say, "Oh, you go show everybody about an economic crash," they would learn something. And that's the hard thing to do. How do you get a bunch of Americans to sit on their hands, close their mouth, and listen? This is how it works. But honestly, this is not how the world works. And this is why economic crashes happen. Because 95% of the people have no freaking clue and don't want to learn. So here's my question to you. Are you ready to go out and crush it? That's an easy question. And you know what? People are going to lose their homes. I'm going to buy them. And I hope you buy them too. Because I'm trying to do everything I can to warn everybody. And I know you are too. And I am not going to sit back and let a bunch of banks get bigger and fatter and control you or I even more, get the government get bigger, because you got to feel sad for everybody losing their house. I'm out trying to warn everybody. Are you? Type 1 if you're planning on crushing it and you don't give a rat's butt that someone's going to lose their house. I feel bad, but I'm trying to warn them. Millions and millions of people each day. But you know what? Sometimes you got to sit back and you're just going to have to get rich. And that's the only way you can help people. There are a lot of people that hope in one hand, and you could crap in one hand, hope in another, find out which one fills up faster. But in the end of the day, the only thing that helps anyone, money. If they're hungry, you got to buy them food. If they're cold, you got to buy them a coat. And then you could share that good information, that good news with them. And I hope you got something out of this. Maybe it's more than just a rant, but sometimes you just got to let go. Hopefully you have a great day. The Economic Ninja. Oh, wait a minute. I have to say one other thing. In the Bible, it also says the wealth of the heathen is stored up for the righteous. A lot of people use that. It's called a crutch. You're his hands and feet. If you want to quote scripture, you got to understand, you got to do work. And you don't just get to sit back and let a bunch of money land in your lap. Never happened as far as I know. So you've actually got to do something about it. It takes hard work. And you know what God does with that hard work that you do, and especially when you tithe 10%, he blesses you. He increases it. But you got to do something. It says work or faith without works is dead. Hope you got something out of this. Ninja, out.